I was 30 minutes late to the digital marketing registration and sweating bullets. My boss Diane had made it crystal clear. Improve my skills or kiss my year-end bonus goodbye. As I scrambled through the online portal, the system kept crashing. "Come on, you piece of shit," I muttered, clicking the submit button for the 5th time. The irony wasn't lost on me, a PR executive who couldn't navigate a simple registration form. My blonde hair was falling from its perfect bun as I hunched over my laptop, desperation setting in. When the confirmation finally appeared, I let out an embarrassingly loud victory whoop. My neighbor's dog started barking through the wall. Great. Another friendship ruined by my career panic. The first virtual class began 2 days later. I logged in early, determined to make a good impression after my registration fiasco. Faces popped up in neat little boxes, tired executives, ambitious millennials, one guy who definitely thought his camera was off while picking his nose. "Welcome everyone to Advanced Digital Marketing Strategies," the instructor began. "Let's go around with brief introductions." I practiced my intro silently, fixing my hair and adjusting my green eyes to hit that perfect level of professional engagement in the webcam. When my turn came, I managed not to ramble too much about my 5 years at Crawford Communications. Then she appeared on screen. "I'm Esme Anderson, brand manager at Innovata Labs," she said, her voice carrying unexpected warmth through my cheap speakers. Dark brown hair framed a face that somehow managed to look both professionally serious and naturally inviting. "I'm looking to integrate more dynamic PR approaches into our brand strategy." I couldn't look away from her brown eyes. Intelligent, slightly amused, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. When she finished speaking, I realized I'd been holding my breath. Throughout the lecture, I found myself watching her reactions more than the slides. She asked thoughtful questions that made the instructor pause, clearly impressed. Her confidence was magnetic. When she disagreed with a point about influencer metrics, I nearly applauded at my screen. For next week's session, the instructor announced as class ended, "You'll be working in assigned pairs on a semester-long project." My stomach tightened. Group projects were educational purgatory, either carrying deadweight or being micromanaged to death. Names appeared in the chat. I scrolled anxiously. Vanessa Cook and Esme Anderson. My heart did a ridiculous little skip. Before I could process this development, a private message popped up. "Looks like we're partners. Coffee sometime this week to discuss strategy? Esme." I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "Absolutely." "Thursday evening work? I know a great place downtown." Our first proper planning session extended 3 hours past its intended length. I learned she'd moved to Irvine 2 years ago, preferred oat milk in her coffee, and had strong opinions about kerning in advertisements that made me laugh until my sides hurt. "Sorry for keeping you so late," she said, as we finally packed up our laptops. The cafe was nearly empty. "Don't be. This is the most productive I've been all week." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes. "Same here. It's nice working with someone who actually gets it." Walking to my car afterward, I tried to dismiss the warm feeling spreading through my chest. This was professional development, nothing more. But that night, I found myself checking her LinkedIn profile, then her Instagram. By midnight, I knew her favorite hiking trails, and that she volunteered at an animal shelter. I slammed my laptop shut, horrified at myself. This wasn't high school. Still, when my phone pinged with a text, "Just had an idea for our project approach." "Too late to call?" I answered immediately, settling in for a conversation that would stretch until 2 a.m., neither of us mentioning that only 10 minutes involved actual coursework. The downtown cafe was my suggestion, but I still arrived 20 minutes early, claiming the corner table with the best natural light. I'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on something that screamed professional but not trying too hard. Dark jeans and a blue silk blouse that brought out my eyes. When Esme walked in, I nearly knocked over my coffee. Online meetings hadn't done justice to her presence. She moved with quiet confidence, scanning the room before finding me with a smile that hit me like a physical force. Her brunette hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and she wore a simple charcoal dress that somehow managed to look both business-appropriate and breathtaking. "Hope I didn't keep you waiting," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Just got here," I lied, suddenly aware of how many preliminary notes I'd already scribbled. We spread our materials across the table and dove into project planning. But something had changed since our online interactions. In person, I noticed everything. The slight wrinkle between her brows when concentrating, how she gestured with her hands when excited about an idea, the faint scent of her perfume when she leaned closer to view my screen. "Your approach to audience segmentation is brilliant," she said, her fingers brushing mine as she took my pen to circle something in my notes. My skin tingled where she'd touched. "Just building on your content strategy," I managed. 2 hours flew by. Our coffee cups emptied and were refilled. When she excused herself to the restroom, I caught myself staring after her, then immediately pretended to be deeply engrossed in my notes when she returned. "So," she said, settling back into her chair, "how did you get into PR?" The conversation shifted from professional to personal. She laughed at my stories about disaster clients, and I found myself leaning in as she described her journey from graphic design to brand management. The afternoon stretched into evening, and somehow we were still there when the cafe started dimming lights. "I think they're trying to kick us out," I said reluctantly. "Let them try," she replied, with a mischievous smile that made my heart stutter. We aced our midterm presentation the following month. Our synthesis of PR tactics and brand strategy impressed even the most jaded course instructor, who suggested we consider publishing our approach as a case study. "We need to celebrate," Esme declared afterward, practically glowing with triumph. "Drinks tonight?" At a dimly lit bar downtown, surrounded by after-work crowds, we claimed a tiny high-top table that forced us to sit close. One drink became two, and the professional boundaries we'd maintained began to blur. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, twirling the straw in her cocktail. When I nodded, she continued, "I just got out of a relationship, about 3 months ago." "I'm sorry," I said, unsure where this was going. "Don't be. Marcus and we weren't good together. He never understood my ambitions." She looked down. "He thought my career was a hobby until I settled down." "His loss," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. When she looked up, something had changed in her expression. "That's what I like about you, Vanessa. You get it. You get me." Her hand moved across the table, fingertips brushing against mine in a touch that felt deliberate. Neither of us moved away. My pulse thundered in my ears. The moment broke when the server arrived with another round, but something had shifted between us, something I wasn't ready to name. The days that followed were torture. I threw myself into other work projects, scheduling client meetings during times I might be tempted to suggest another study session. But still, I found reasons to text her. Articles related to our project, industry news, and eventually, funny observations that had nothing to do with work at all. Each time my phone lit up with her name, my stomach flipped. I told myself it was professional admiration, networking at its finest. But late at night, when I caught myself scrolling through our conversation history, smiling at inside jokes that had developed over the weeks, I knew I was lying to myself. This wasn't just about the course anymore, and that terrified me. Crisis hit on a Tuesday morning. One of our biggest clients had their internal emails leaked, revealing some rather unflattering comments about their customers. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since 6 a.m., and by noon, I'd skipped both breakfast and lunch, surviving on nothing but black coffee and panic. "We need a statement in 30 minutes, my boss barked, hovering over my desk as I typed frantically. "Working on draft 3 now," I replied, not looking up. The office buzzed with crisis energy, phones ringing, people shouting across the room, the printer jamming at the worst possible moment. By 7 that evening, when most colleagues had left, I was still hunched over my computer, trying to manage the social media fallout. My eyes burned from screen glare, and my shoulders felt permanently fused to my ears. A knock on the door frame startled me. I looked up, blinking rapidly. "You look like you need this," said Esme, holding up a takeout bag that smelled like heaven. "And maybe this, too." She raised her other hand, clutching a bottle of wine. "How did you know?" I managed, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must look. She smiled, setting the food on my desk. "Your texts went from paragraphs to single words around noon. Then you stopped responding altogether. I figured either crisis or kidnapping." The simple kindness broke something in me. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed someone to see me struggling. "The client is demanding a complete rebrand by tomorrow morning," I said, rubbing my eyes, "which is impossible." "Not impossible," Esme corrected, pulling up a chair. "Just needs a professional touch." She opened her laptop. "I've managed worse." For the next 3 hours, we strategized. Esme's brand expertise complemented my crisis management perfectly. She knew exactly which visual elements would signal contrition without admitting legal liability. Her suggestions were brilliant, unexpected. "You didn't have to do this," I said as we finalized the presentation around midnight. "This isn't even your client." "I know," she replied, her eyes meeting mine in the dim office. "But you'd do the same for me." I realized with certainty that I would. Without hesitation. The crisis passed. My client loved our approach, my boss took full credit, and life returned to normal, except it didn't. Something had shifted between Esme and I. Our text exchanges grew more frequent, more personal. We began meeting for coffee without the pretense of coursework. A week after the crisis, we found ourselves working late at my apartment on our final project. Papers and laptops covered my coffee table, takeout containers stacked precariously on one corner. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, creating a cocoon around us. "I think we're overthinking this section," Esme said, leaning back against my couch. "Sometimes the simplest approach is best," says the woman who just suggested a 3-tiered implementation strategy, I teased. She laughed, nudging my shoulder with hers. When had we moved so close together? Her arm pressed against mine felt warm, electric. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, her voice suddenly serious. My heart raced. "Anything." "I'm not sure this is just about the project anymore." Her eyes met mine, steady but vulnerable. "The way I feel when we're together." "I know," I whispered, barely audible. "It scares me how much I think about you," she continued. "When we're apart, when we're together. Especially when you get that little crease between your eyebrows when you're concentrating." Her fingers reached up, gently touching the spot between my brows. I couldn't breathe. "Esme," I managed, "we work together, sort of. There are boundaries." "I know," she said, but her hand moved to my cheek. "Tell me to stop." I couldn't. Instead, I leaned forward, closing the distance between us. Her lips met mine tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. The kiss was soft, questioning, and then suddenly it wasn't. It deepened into something hungry, inevitable. My hands tangled in her hair as she pulled me closer. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I saw my own wonder mirrored in her face. "That was," she began. "Problematic?" I suggested with a nervous laugh. I was going to say overdue. Morning brought doubt creeping in with the sunlight. I made coffee while Esme used my shower, my mind racing through potential complications. Professional boundaries crossed. Project dynamics compromised. What if it didn't work out? What if it did? Esme emerged from the bathroom, hair damp, wearing yesterday's clothes but somehow looking perfectly put together. "I can hear you overthinking from across the apartment," she said, accepting the coffee mug I offered. "This complicates things," I said carefully. "It does," she agreed. "But Vanessa, I haven't felt this way in, maybe ever." Her directness disarmed me. "If you want to pretend last night didn't happen." "I don't," I interrupted. "That's what scares me. How much I don't want to pretend that." She smiled then, placing her mug down to take both my hands in hers. "So we don't pretend, we figure it out, together." "Is this too much?" Esme asked, placing another container of fancy cheese into the wicker basket. "For a picnic or for a first date?" I replied, watching her methodical packing with amusement. "Both, I guess." She looked suddenly uncertain, a rare crack in her usual confidence. I leaned in and kissed her cheek. "It's perfect." Our relationship had transitioned from professional to personal with surprising ease. After 2 weeks of stolen kisses between project discussions and lengthy phone calls that had nothing to do with marketing, Esme had suggested a proper date, a picnic at her favorite spot overlooking the Irvine coastline. We hiked up the trail together, hands occasionally brushing. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, including Esme's profile, when she turned to point out landmarks. Once we reached the hilltop, the view stopped me in my tracks. Endless ocean stretching to the horizon, waves catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. "Worth the climb?" she asked, spreading a blanket on a flat stretch of grass. "Worth every step," I replied, not looking at the view but at her. She unpacked her elaborate spread, artisanal cheeses, fresh bread, fruit, and wine. We settled side by side, close enough that our shoulders touched, facing the ocean. "Tell me about your first relationship," she said, passing me a glass of wine. I laughed. Starting with the heavy stuff? I want to know everything about you, she replied simply. So I told her about Sarah from college, about Michael who taught me I wasn't as straight as I'd thought, about relationships that fizzled under the pressure of my career ambitions. What about you? I asked. Besides Marcus. Her expression clouded slightly. There were a few before him, nothing serious until Natalie in grad school. She took a sip of wine. She was brilliant, challenging. We burned hot and fast. What happened? Different visions. She wanted to move to New York. I wanted to build something here. Esme's finger traced patterns in the condensation on her glass. Marcus came later. He seemed stable, understood business, until he didn't. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in impossible pinks and oranges. I've never brought anyone here before, she admitted quietly. I turned to face her fully. Thank you for sharing it with me. Her kiss tasted like wine and possibility. We spent the following weeks discovering each other. Workdays filled with professional focus, evenings and weekends learning the rhythms of a new relationship. Esme loved art galleries but hated museums. She sang in the shower but never in public. She kept chocolate hidden in her desk drawer for emergencies. 3 weeks after our picnic, she suggested a weekend away, a small bed and breakfast on the coast, 2 hours south. Just us, she said. No projects, no clients, no distractions. The cottage sat on a bluff above the beach, windows open to sea air and the constant rhythm of waves. At sunset, we walked barefoot along the shoreline, water lapping at our ankles. Cold. I yelped when a larger wave caught us by surprise. Esme laughed, pulling me closer. I'll warm you up. Back in our room, she made good on her promise. Tentative touches grew bolder in the moonlight streaming through gauzy curtains. Her fingertips traced pathways across my skin that left me breathless, discovering sensitive places I hadn't known existed. When her lips followed the same routes, I gasped her name into the darkness. You're beautiful, she whispered, her body moving against mine in a slow, deliberate rhythm. I pulled her closer, learning her responses, memorizing the curve of her spine, the sound of her breath catching when I found just the right spot. Time dissolved into sensation, the silk of her hair between my fingers, the taste of salt on her skin, the perfect weight of her above me. Later, tangled in sheets with the sound of waves providing our soundtrack, she traced lazy patterns on my collarbone. I haven't felt this way before, she murmured, half asleep. Me neither, I admitted, tightening my arms around her. Our course graduation dinner fell the weekend after our getaway. We arrived separately but gravitated toward each other immediately, standing closer than strictly professional. Are we being obvious? I whispered as she handed me a glass of champagne, our fingers lingering. Absolutely, she replied with a smile. Do you mind? I considered the question, scanning the room. Surprisingly, no. Diana, my coworker who'd taken the same course, cornered me by the appetizers. So, you and the brand manager, huh? Is it that obvious? I asked, heat rising to my cheeks. Honey, blind people could see it. You practically glow when she's nearby. Diana nudged me. She's good for you. You laugh more. By the end of the evening, we'd received knowing looks from classmates and several comments about our productive partnership. When Esme's hand found mine under the table during speeches, I didn't pull away. As we left together, no longer pretending we weren't heading to the same place, she squeezed my hand. Ready to go public, Miss Cook? I kissed her in response, right there in the parking lot under the stars. The day started normally enough. Esme had left early for a client presentation, kissing me goodbye while I was still half asleep in her bed. I smiled into her pillow, breathing in her scent before reluctantly getting up to prepare for my own day. We'd been officially together for 2 months, and I still felt that ridiculous flutter whenever I thought about her. My phone buzzed with her morning text. Presentation went well. Boss loved it. Still on for lunch? I replied quickly, already looking forward to seeing her. These small check-ins throughout our days had become precious routines. Around noon, my phone rang. Diana, not Esme. Have you talked to Esme? She asked without preamble. Not since this morning. Why? Diana hesitated. I was dropping off materials at Innovate Labs. There was some guy creating a scene in their lobby. Security was trying to remove him. He kept demanding to see Esme. My stomach dropped. Description? Tall, dark hair, expensive suit, handsome in that Wall Street shark way. Marcus. It had to be. I thanked Diana and immediately tried calling Esme. No answer. I sent a text, everything okay? Diana mentioned a disturbance at your office. The minutes ticked by without response. I couldn't focus on work, checking my phone every 30 seconds. Finally, almost an hour later, she replied, can't talk now. Rain check on lunch. We'll call later. Something was wrong. Esme's texts were usually full of details and emojis, never this clipped. She called that evening as I was leaving work. Sorry about today, she said, her voice tight. Things got complicated. Was it Marcus? A pause. Yes. He showed up unannounced, made a scene in the lobby. What did he want? To talk, according to him. I could hear her moving around her apartment. He said he's realized his mistake, wants another chance. Fear coiled in my stomach, and I told him it's over, that I've moved on. She sighed. He didn't take it well. That night, she came to my place instead of me going to hers as planned. She seemed distracted, checking her phone more often than usual. When I asked what was wrong, she showed me the texts, a dozen messages from Marcus ranging from apologetic to accusatory. He'll get tired of it, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. The next morning, 3 bouquets arrived at her office. The day after, an expensive watch she'd once mentioned liking. Each gift came with notes referencing specific moments from their relationship, calculated reminders of their history. Just ignore him, I suggested, trying to hide my unease. I am. She deleted his messages unread now. He'll get the message eventually. But a week later, as we were having dinner at my apartment, her phone lit up with his name again. Aren't you going to check it? I asked when she deliberately turned her phone face down. No need, it's the same as the others. But something in her expression had changed. Against my better judgment, I picked up her phone. The message preview on the lock screen made my blood run cold. Does Vanessa know about the night before you broke up with me? I put the phone down, feeling ill. What does that mean? Esme took my hands. Nothing. It means nothing. He's trying to create problems because he can't stand that I'm happy without him. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. But his tactics were working, planting little seeds of doubt, creating tension where there had been none. Late that night, another message came. I saw you two at Mariposa's restaurant last week. Cozy. Does your new girlfriend know about your history with commitment? Esme turned pale. How did he know where we were? The question hung between us, unanswered but troubling. The calls came next. Late night, early morning, middle of the day. Esme blocked his number, so he called from others. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he just breathed before hanging up. She changed her personal number, giving the new one only to close friends and me. For 3 days, blessed silence. We began to relax, believing the worst was over. Then came the night Esme stayed at my place. Around 2 a.m., my doorbell rang repeatedly. By the time I reached my living room window, I saw a familiar figure walking away, tall, dark-haired, moving with angry purpose. He was here, I whispered, returning to bed. At my apartment. Esme sat up, fully awake now. That's impossible. He doesn't know where you live. Apparently he does. The implications settled heavily between us. He'd been following one or both of us, learning our routines, our favorite places, my address. We should call the police, I said, reaching for my phone. Esme caught my hand. And tell them what? That my ex is sending texts and rang your doorbell once? They won't do anything without more. So we wait until he does something worse? She had no answer for that. The next day, I caught sight of a black sedan following my car on the way to work. It kept a careful distance, but made every turn I did. When I pulled into a random gas station, it drove past slowly, the driver's face obscured. That evening, while walking to my car in the parking garage, I felt watched. Footsteps echoed mine, stopping when I stopped, resuming when I moved. I ran the last 100 feet to my car, fumbling with my keys, certain someone was closing in behind me. We need to talk, Esme said, her voice strained as she paced my living room. 3 weeks of Marcus's escalating behavior had left dark circles under her eyes. This isn't working. What isn't? I asked, though I already knew. Us being together openly. It's making things worse. She stopped pacing, facing me with determination that scared me more than Marcus ever could. He's fixated on hurting what makes me happy, which means hurting you. So what exactly are you suggesting? My voice came out sharper than intended. She took a deep breath. We need to cool things off. Publicly, at least. Make him think we've broken up. You can't be serious. I searched her face for any hint she was joking. You want to let him win? This isn't about winning, she countered. It's about safety, yours specifically. Yesterday he left a note on my car saying he knows your daily schedule, your coffee stops, your gym routine. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. She moved closer, taking my hands. Look, it's temporary. Just until I can get a restraining order, or he loses interest. I pulled away. So we just, what, pretend we don't care about each other? Stop seeing each other entirely? Not entirely. Her eyes pleaded with me. Just, carefully. No public dates, no staying over at each other's places, no social media connection. That's not a relationship, Esme. That's a secret affair. It's a pause, she insisted. To protect what we've built. We argued late into the night. I accused her of capitulating to emotional terrorism. She accused me of prioritizing our romance over practical safety. Both of us said things that scraped against vulnerable places. I've spent years of my life hiding who I am, I said finally, exhausted. I won't go back to that. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not asking you to hide who you are, just who you're with, temporarily. How long is temporary? I don't know, she admitted. A few weeks, a month? In the end, I reluctantly agreed, but the decision felt like acid in my throat. We crafted a plan. We would appear to drift apart publicly. Limited contact through work channels only. Diana would serve as our go-between for any necessary communication. The next morning felt like a funeral. Esme packed the few items she kept at my apartment while I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending the coffee machine required my full attention. When she was ready to leave, we stood awkwardly in my entryway. This is ridiculous, I said finally. We're adults. This isn't high school. I know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But he's escalating, and I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of me. I wanted to argue more, but the genuine fear in her eyes stopped me. Instead, I stepped forward, intending a quick goodbye kiss. But the moment our lips met, something desperate took over. Her hands tangled in my hair as I pressed her against the wall, kissing her like I was drowning and she was air. She responded with equal hunger, fingers fumbling with the buttons of my shirt. We shouldn't, she whispered against my neck, even as her hands pulled me closer. One last time, I murmured back. Before. We never finished the conversation, lost instead in the frantic mapping of each other's bodies, as if trying to memorize everything before separation. When we finally broke apart, both breathless and disheveled, tears streaked her cheeks. This isn't goodbye, she insisted, straightening her clothes. Just intermission. Intermission, I repeated, the word hollow. I watched from my window as she walked to her car, not looking back. The moment she disappeared from view, emptiness crashed over me like a physical wave. I slid down the wall to sit on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. My apartment felt wrong without her presence. Too quiet, too orderly. I wandered from room to room, finding traces of her everywhere. A forgotten earring on my nightstand, a half-used bottle of her shampoo in my shower, notes she'd left on my refrigerator. The first week of separation was brutal. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, hoping for some communication from her, then remembering our agreement. I crafted work emails on unrelated topics just for an excuse to see her name in my inbox. At night, I stared at her contact information in my phone, finger hovering over the call button, never pressing it. I checked social media obsessively, noting she'd changed her relationship status back to single. A logical part of our plan, but it still felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Diana kept me updated with carefully casual comments dropped during coffee breaks. Esme mentioned the Wilson account is progressing, she'd say, which meant Esme was okay. Or, might want to avoid downtown tonight. I heard someone's ex is hanging around the bars there, which meant Marcus was still lurking. Once, she simply handed me a coffee and said, "She misses you too," which nearly broke me right there in the office kitchen. Diana became our lifeline. One afternoon, she slid a folded note across my desk during a meeting, Esme's handwriting, A simple message, thinking of you. Stay safe. I kept that note in my wallet, unfolding it so often the creases began to tear. We developed an elaborate code system through Diana. The Hendricks proposal looks promising meant Marcus had been quiet. Weather forecast looks stormy this weekend warned me to be extra cautious. Diana rolled her eyes at our melodrama, but faithfully delivered each message. You two are worse than my teenage nieces, she complained, dropping another note on my desk 3 weeks into our separation. Just use burner phones, like normal secret lovers. This note was different. A key taped to the paper with an address written below it. If you need somewhere safe, it read in Esme's elegant script. I recognized the address as her friend's vacant condo, mentioned once in passing. That night I received a text from an unknown number, Bookstore Cafe, Hawthorne Street, back corner, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Bring work materials. My heart raced. It had to be Esme. The location was clever, a busy cafe attached to a sprawling bookstore with plenty of private nooks where business meetings wouldn't raise eyebrows. I arrived early, claiming the specified corner with my laptop and papers spread out to look like legitimate work. When Esme appeared, weaving between bookshelves with casual purpose, I nearly knocked over my coffee. She looked beautiful and exhausted, her hair pulled back in a professional bun, dark circles under her eyes partially concealed by makeup. We need to make this look like a business meeting, she murmured, sliding into the seat across from me, placing her own laptop between us like a shield. In case we're being watched. Are we? I whispered, resisting the urge to reach for her hand. I don't think so. He seems to be focusing more on my workplace lately. She opened her computer, angling it so anyone passing would see spreadsheets. We don't have much time. For 30 minutes we had the strangest conversation of my life, discussing marketing strategies loudly enough for nearby patrons to hear, while writing our real thoughts on notepads hidden below the table. The Q3 projections look promising, she said aloud, while her note read, I miss you so much I can't sleep. We should consider alternative approaches, I replied, writing back, when will this end? I need you. Her eyes flickered with emotion. When she excused herself to the restroom, I followed a minute later, heart pounding. In the narrow hallway outside the bathrooms, hidden from the cafe's view by a tall bookshelf, she pulled me close. Our kiss was desperate, hungry with weeks of separation. This was reckless, she whispered against my lips. Worth it, I breathed back, stealing another kiss before we had to return separately to our table. As we gathered our things to leave, maintaining the business meeting charade, she whispered, same time next week. Different location. Diana will tell you. These clandestine meetings became our lifeline. Stolen moments in public places, always disguised as professional encounters. Each one ended with a brief, hidden kiss that had to sustain us until the next time. Meanwhile, I channeled my frustration into work. I took on additional clients, volunteered for projects, stayed late at the office because going home to my empty apartment was too painful. My boss noticed my increased productivity, not knowing it stemmed from heartache rather than ambition. Your campaign for the Lexington account was brilliant, she told me during my quarterly review. The board specifically mentioned your innovative approach. We're promoting you to Senior Communications Director. The promotion came with a substantial raise and more responsibility. In another time, I would have called Esme immediately to celebrate. Instead, I asked Diana to pass along the news. The next day, flowers arrived at my office, congratulatory roses from the team at Crawford Communications. But the card, in familiar handwriting, read simply, so proud of you, always. I found myself using my new position to protect Esme in small ways. When a joint project between our companies was proposed, I maneuvered to keep her name off the collaboration team, preventing any required in-person meetings that might expose our connection. When industry gossip mentioned trouble at Innovati Labs, I quietly investigated through contacts, ensuring none of it would affect Esme's standing. 6 weeks into our separation, Diana arranged another meeting, this time at a tiny independent bookstore cafe across town. He's been quieter, Esme reported, disguising our conversation by pointing at random charts on her laptop. Still watching my apartment sometimes, but the calls have stopped. Maybe it's working, I said, hope flickering. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. I miss waking up with you. My throat tightened. I haven't changed your side of the bed. Still sleep on my side. Her eyes softened with emotion she couldn't express openly in public. Under the table, her foot found mine, pressing gently. the only contact we could risk. As we prepared to leave, maintaining our careful distance, she whispered, "Look for the book on medieval architecture. Third shelf." I waited 10 minutes after she left, then found the section. There, tucked into a massive volume no one was likely to disturb, was a key to her apartment. I didn't use Esme's key immediately. The risk seemed too great, the potential consequences too severe if Marcus was still watching her building. Instead, I carried it with me constantly, a tangible reminder that our separation wasn't permanent. 2 months into our charade, Diana burst into my office without knocking, closing the door behind her. "Esme's car was vandalized in her company parking lot," she said without preamble. "Slashed tires, keyed paint job, and a note under the windshield wiper." My blood ran cold. "What did the note say?" "I don't know details, but it was threatening enough that security footage is being reviewed. She's pretty shaken up." I grabbed my purse, ready to rush to Esme's side, but Diana blocked the door. "Think, Vanessa. If you show up now, everything you've both suffered through becomes pointless." She was right, but the knowledge didn't ease the helplessness crushing my chest. I spent that night pacing my apartment, jumping at every sound, checking my phone constantly. Esme didn't contact me, not even through Diana. The next morning, Diana handed me a coffee and a sticky note with a single sentence in Esme's handwriting. "It's time to end this." My heart stopped until Diana rolled her eyes. "She means the separation, not you two. Drama queens." That afternoon, Esme called a meeting with her company's HR department and security team, filing a formal report about Marcus's harassment. With the vandalism as concrete evidence and security footage confirming his presence, the company took immediate action, documenting everything for potential legal proceedings. "I've scheduled a consultation with a lawyer," Esme told me through Diana. "Enough evidence for a restraining order now." While Esme navigated legal channels, I received an unexpected ally. My boss called me into her office, expression unusually serious. "Vanessa, is someone harassing you?" I froze. "Why do you ask?" She slid a printout across her desk, an email from an anonymous account, containing personal details about my relationship with Esme and veiled threats. "This came to the company address. IT traced it to an external source," she explained. "I need to know if you're in danger." The walls I'd carefully built around my professional and personal lives collapsed. Through tears I explained everything: Esme, Marcus, our separation strategy. Instead of the judgment I feared, my boss offered immediate support. "Crawford Communications has a zero-tolerance harassment policy that extends to our employees' personal safety," she stated firmly. "We'll involve our legal team immediately." Within hours, both our companies had aligned in protection mode. Security escorts to our cars, documentation of all suspicious activity, corporate lawyers collaborating on the restraining order filing. The support was overwhelming after months of isolation and secrecy. That evening, a company security guard accompanied me home, checking my apartment before leaving. As I locked the door behind him, my phone rang, Esme's number, not Diana's. "It's really me," she said when I answered cautiously. "We don't need codes anymore." Both legal teams agreed. Hiding has only empowered him. Her voice, unfiltered and direct after so long, made me sink to the floor, overcome. "Can I see you?" I asked. "I'm already on my way." 30 minutes later, she was at my door, security personnel from her company discreetly stationed in the lobby below. The moment the door closed, we collided in a desperate embrace, months of separation dissolving in seconds. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against my hair. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was just letting him control us." "We're fixing it now," I assured her, leading her to the couch. "That's what matters." We spent that night reviewing the restraining order application, organizing evidence, preparing statements. Between legal discussions, we reconnected through touch, fingers intertwined, shoulders pressed together, occasional kisses that threatened to derail our focus. The restraining order was filed the next morning, with both our company's legal departments expediting the process. 3 days later, it was granted, Marcus legally prohibited from approaching either of us or our workplaces. We believed it was over. We went back to our routines, no longer hiding but still cautious. Security personnel remained present at our buildings as a precaution. Then came the corporate gala, a major industry event that both our companies attended annually. As senior executives, neither of us could skip it without raising questions. We arrived separately, but gradually drifted together throughout the evening, no longer pretending our connection didn't exist. I was at the bar getting drinks when I felt someone behind me. Turning, expecting Esme, I instead found myself facing Marcus, perfectly groomed, expression controlled, but eyes burning with anger. "So this is why she left," he said, gaze flicking over me dismissively. "Didn't take you for the type to wreck relationships." "You need to leave," I replied, voice steadier than I felt. "There's a restraining order against approaching Esme," he corrected. "You were just a convenient addition." He stepped closer. "She'll get bored with you. It's her pattern. The excitement wears off and she starts looking elsewhere." I spotted Esme across the room, watching us with growing alarm. As she started toward us, I made a decision. No more hiding, no more fear. "You're violating a legal order," I stated loudly, drawing attention from nearby guests, and demonstrating exactly why it was necessary. Security responded almost immediately, surrounding Marcus. As they escorted him out, he called over his shoulder to Esme, who had reached my side. "This isn't finished." When the doors closed behind him, conversation slowly resumed. Esme took my hand, squeezing tightly. "Yes, it is," she said, though he couldn't hear her. "It absolutely is." The weeks following the gala incident unfolded with a strange lightness. Marcus respected the restraining order, not out of consideration for our feelings, but because his company had made it clear that further incidents would end his career, with the immediate threat diminished. Esme and I found ourselves adjusting to normalcy after months of tension. "It's weird not looking over my shoulder constantly," I admitted one Sunday morning as we lingered over coffee in my kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting auburn glints in Esme's dark hair. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she agreed, reaching across the table to take my hand. "But maybe this time, there isn't one." Healing came in small moments. Esme reclaimed her favorite restaurant that she'd avoided for fear of running into Marcus. I deleted the security apps I'd installed on my phone. We relearned how to move through the world without constant vigilance. The experience changed us, Esme reflected one evening as we walked along the Irvine waterfront. Not just individually, but as a couple. "For better or worse?" I asked, watching seagulls circle overhead. "Better," she said without hesitation. "We've seen each other at our most vulnerable. No more hiding." She was right. The forced separation had revealed something fundamental about our relationship, its resilience. Where other connections might have crumbled under similar pressure, ours had somehow strengthened. One afternoon, Diana cornered me in the break room at work. "So now that your Romeo and Juliet drama is over, what's next for you two?" I laughed. "Normal couple things? Dinner dates without code words, weekend trips without security escorts." "Boring," she declared with mock disappointment. I was enjoying my spy career, but life was anything but boring. With the shadow of Marcus removed, Esme and I discovered new dimensions to our relationship. We challenged each other professionally, debating marketing strategies over dinner. We explored Irvine together, finding hidden gems neither had discovered alone. During a brainstorming session for a difficult client, I had an epiphany. What if we proposed a joint project between our companies? I suggested to my boss the next day. Crawford's PR expertise combined with Innovate Labs' brand strategy could revolutionize how we approach digital marketing. The idea gained immediate traction. Within weeks, Esme and I found ourselves leading collaborative meetings, our professional chemistry as apparent as our personal connection. Our respective companies formed a strategic partnership, creating an innovative approach to digital brand communications that quickly drew industry attention. "We're unstoppable together," Esme whispered during our presentation to the executive board, which received unanimous approval. Spring turned to summer, marking 1 year since our first meeting in that online course. To celebrate, I suggested returning to the coastal spot where we'd had our first official date. I arrived early, setting up our picnic on the same bluff overlooking the ocean. The anniversary gift in my pocket felt simultaneously heavy and buoyant with possibility. When Esme appeared on the path, her smile rivaled the setting sun. She wore a sundress that caught the breeze, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Happy anniversary," she said, settling beside me on the blanket. We watched the waves crash below as I gathered my courage. Turning to face her, I took her hands in mine. "This year hasn't been easy," I began. "But even during our hardest moments, I never doubted what we have." Her eyes glistened as I continued. "You make me stronger, braver, better. You challenge me and support me in equal measure." I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small velvet box I'd been carrying for weeks. "I don't want any more separations, temporary or otherwise," I said, opening it to reveal a platinum band set with a single emerald that matched her eyes. "Build a future with me?" Her kiss was answer enough, passionate and tender simultaneously. As the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, her hands traced familiar paths along my skin, our bodies remembering each other in the privacy of gathering twilight. "Yes," she whispered against my lips, between kisses that promised forever. "Absolutely yes." Later, as stars appeared above us, we lay tangled together on the blanket, discussing dreams suddenly within reach. A house with an ocean view, professional collaborations, adventures across continents, quiet Sunday mornings stretching into decades. Who would have thought, Esme mused, her head on my shoulder, that a crisis management course would change our lives? "Best professional development investment ever," I replied, kissing her forehead. The ring caught starlight as she reached up to touch my face, both of us understanding that what we'd found was rarer and more precious than either had imagined possible. A love strengthened by fire, tested by separation, and ultimately unbreakable.